I think a lot of times we struggle with doing what we're supposed to do because we don't understand who we are, because sometimes we think, oh, that's for them. That's for somebody else. Well, actually, what if it's not for somebody else? What if it's actually for you? And so we have to understand that when it says that this is for Israel, or this is for the children of the living Elohim, or this is for the children of promise, or this is, who are those people? And how does that relate to you? Could you be those people? If they don't understand the one offering, why would they understand the ones who chose to receive? Because if they understood the one offering, they would have chosen to receive also. So they don't understand why you chose to receive because they didn't make the same choice you made. And that's the way it is in all life. I mean, aren't there things that have gone on where you and somebody else were looking at something or going through a situation and one chose to handle it a certain way and the other didn't, and the person who didn't looks at you and doesn't understand why you chose to do what you do? Like, how about when you chose to stop going to Sunday church? Do you have friends and family who don't understand why you made that choice? Or you chose to stop doing certain feasts and certain holy days for the ones that are in the Bible. Or you chose to eat differently. There are people that don't understand that because they don't understand Him. Well, isn't that what John's talking about here? He says, look, see what love the Father has given us that we should be called. Now, by the way, we can say that about all human beings. It was so much love that He gave all the opportunity for this. He says, however, we chose and we received, and for this reason the world doesn't know us because it didn't know Him. You know, the first time that I was listening to a teaching talking about the identity of Israel, kind of like the teaching I do on the identity of Israel, where it talked about things that had to do with the restoration of the two houses and all that kind of stuff. The teacher mentioned this verse, and I wanted to know who stuck that in my Bible and why I never saw that before. Because he says, this is Yeshua speaking. Remember, we haven't done this yet, this teaching. Context requires us to do a few things. First of all, who's speaking? Yeshua. Who's he talking to? Well, a Jewish audience. What is he talking about? He's talking about, he says, look, I was not sent. He's telling everybody, this is the reason I am here. So Yeshua basically is an apostle. He's a shaliach. He's a sent one. He was sent by the Father. He said, I was not sent except for one reason. This is the reason I was sent. I was sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Wow. You see, he wasn't sent to start a new church. He wasn't sent to start a new religion. He wasn't sent to do away with the law, the Torah. He was sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now, of course, if you have no understanding of the Tanakh, of the Old Testament, if you have no understanding of the prophecies, if you don't understand why the lost tribes are scattered in the first place, you have no idea why he's saying this. So that's part of our identity crisis, which is why you have to go and listen to something like the Identity of Israel, past, present, and future teaching I did, so you can understand what happened in all of those things. How many places in the world can you go and not find an American? In other words, somebody that had been left behind whose parents were American or some connection to American lineage. Almost anywhere you go, there are transplanted Americans, visiting Americans, those who got left behind because during wars, Americans left their seed behind. In other words, there's some lineage to America in almost every country. And we've only existed 200 years. What about Israelites that go back over 2,000 years? Any chance that those guys have found a way into every possible country? Because of travel, because of wars, because of whatever? And so that's why he's talking about every possible nation. We've got to overcome the myopic sort of way that we look at things in this really, tight little view that we see things. We have to broaden our spectrum to understand what Yeshua was talking about. This is the way that all can have access. This is what he meant to Abraham when he said, you'll be the father of many nations. Because think about it, he just told Abraham he was going to be the father of a bunch of goyim, those who are outside the camp. But through him they will be blessed. In other words, a way will be provided that they can come into the camp. Because he says, through your seed, the many nations out there will be blessed. So how does that work? Well, when you read the verse, you didn't know. Now maybe you have a better idea. But notice that, and this is one of those overcoming things, and we're going to hit on it more as we get through the teaching here, but don't go into the way of the Gentiles. Don't do as they do. That's a theme all throughout when they came out of Egypt. They came out of Egypt, and you hear Yahweh saying over and over again, I'm going to walk you through a bunch of other nations on the way to the land. Do not do as they do. Don't look at them and go, oh, how do you worship your gods? Maybe we should worship ours that way. Don't do that. This is why Christianity is the mess that it is today, because they did that. That's how Christmas came in. That's how Easter came in. Sunday worship came in. These are all, we call that syncretism. Syncretism, not synchronizing, but syncretizing. Okay? Bringing and merging together two things that really don't belong. This is still talking about overcoming, because we have to overcome and understand who it is that Yeshua came for, what the whole point of everything is, because you know what? We were lied to. Because you may be sitting here, what's this have to do with overcoming? Well, we have to overcome the whole plan of everything. The church told you the plan was about saving souls and blah, 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 and we replaced Israel and all. No, they had it all wrong. You've been lied to. The plan was to complete what was already prophesied. It was already prophesied that they would be punished, and it was already prophesied that they would be redeemed. The plan is what it always was. There's not a new plan. There's not plan B. This is still all part of plan A. But we have to overcome all of that indoctrination that we've had about understanding these things. I say this and witness in the Master. So he's saying, look, I witness in the Master that you should no longer walk as Gentiles walk. Now, by the way, who is he talking to? Well, let's go back through our context. And who's talking here? Paul, right? Rav Shaul. Shaul is talking. Who's he talking to? The congregation in Ephesus. Okay, is he talking to a bunch of Gentiles who just walked in the door yesterday? No. This is a letter he's writing to a group of people that's an established congregation. This isn't the very first meeting they were having. And he's saying, look, you people that are supposedly getting this, I want to witness to you in the Master that you should no longer walk as the Gentiles walk. Which means some of them must have still been doing that. And now he's going to tell us what he means by that. What do I mean by walking as the Gentiles walk? He's going to tell you. He says, in the futility of their mind. In the futility of their mind. What in the world could that possibly mean? What's the futility of their mind? Well, you know, in Philippians 2, and we're going to probably get there at some point here, it says, let this mind be in you. That's the mind we should have. He's saying, you're walking in the futility of your mind. In other words, you're thinking you could figure it out on your strength and your power, and that you're so smart and that you know better. No, nobody needs to teach me anything. I know. That's futility. That's extreme futility. He says, look, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind. Now, again, I've often taught that when he talks about the spirit of your mind, that you're going to be dealing with one of two things. One is the spirit of is the attitude of. The attitude and approach, or we've also talked about being the fullness of the intent. In other words, be renewed in your mind, that your mind would understand and embrace the fullness of what was intended. So the spirit of the law is the fullness of how that law was intended. Like the spirit of adultery, where it says, thou shalt not commit adultery, the fullness of the intent was that you would not even desire to commit adultery. You would not lust after the other person while you are married, even if you didn't actually physically commit the act. That's the fullness of the intent. But he's also talking about an attitude here. So sometimes spirit is nothing more than just talking about attitude. We don't have to quote-unquote spiritualize everything. This doesn't have to be about the Ruach. He's simply saying, look, you need to be renewed in the attitude in your head. You got to get rid of that Gentile attitude and get a Mashiach-like attitude. Approach. We say that sometimes somebody has a rebellious spirit, a disobedient spirit, a rambunctious spirit, whatever it is. Is that actually that they're possessed by a spirit called obnoxious or a spirit called rambunctious? Or no, it's an attitude, it's a disposition. Can we agree on that? Well, that's what this might be. So just know that that might be what he's talking about here. And be renewed in the spirit of your mind, the attitude, the disposition of your mind, to be disposed in the way of Messiah, not in the way of the Gentiles. That's a terrible verse if just taken by itself, just because it gives you some license to say, well, just believing that he is all I need to do. He's not talking about that. He's He's talking about the fullness of the essence of what that's about. How do I know? Well, let's go back to 1 John chapter 2. In 1 John chapter 2 it says, and by this we know that we know him if we guard his commands. And the one who says, I know him and does not guard his commands is a liar. And the truth is not in him. That's 1 John 2, 3, and 4. But he says, but whoever guards his word, truly the love of Elohim has been perfected in him. See, John understood it in a much more full sense than what you're getting by the time you get to chapter 5 and verse 5. And so you can't just pop and cherry pick these verses out. The Yeshua that John is talking about in verse 5 of chapter 5 is exactly the same as what he's talking about in 1 John in chapter 2 and verse 3. He says, you can't say you know him and not keep his commandments, then you're a liar. So when we get to verse 5 of chapter 5, he says, he who is the one overcomes the world, but he who believes that Yeshua is the Son of Elohim. And if you say you know him and are not keeping his commandments, then you're not actually doing verse 5, are you? Because if you knew he was the Son of Elohim and you knew what he came to do, and you know him and had that relationship with him, well, then you would know exactly the fullness of what John's talking about in verse 5.